Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I bought 140 acres of forgotten Arizona dirt, craving silence and freedom. Instead, I got ambushed by a fake HOA, armed goons, and a forged map claiming my land. They tried to erase me, but I had proof, grit, and a shotgun. This isn't just a land dispute, it's a war they started. I'd never seen a place quite like it. 140 acres of stubborn, sun-blasted earth stretching out beneath the Arizona sky, dotted with mesquite, half-buried barbed wire, and the skeletal remains of what used to be a working farm. Most people would have seen a liability. I saw peace. The land had been sitting in county limbo for years, part of a tax-defaulted property auction that barely drew any bidders. No utilities, no access to public water, and half the roads leading to it weren't even paved anymore. But I wasn't after convenience. After 15 years doing contract work overseas and another 5 restoring historic buildings across the Southwest, I was tired. Tired of fake townhomes, noise ordinances, and neighbors who thought they owned your weekends. I wanted space. I wanted silence. And this place offered both. The paperwork was surprisingly clean. No HOA. No liens. Just a neglected stretch of American dirt with a rusted-out barn from the 40s and the ghost of a windmill. I signed the deed, drove back to Tucson to load up my trailer, and hit the road the next morning with 2 toolboxes, 1 generator, a folding cot, and the kind of excitement I hadn't felt in years. The access road was rough. 2 miles of washboard gravel through dry scrubland. As I turned off the county-maintained stretch and onto the private section leading up to my lot, I spotted a curious sight. A brand new aluminum gate, flanked by stucco pillars right across the damn road. Emblazoned across the middle in earth tone lettering, Saguaro Trails Preserve, Private Community. I slowed down, confused. There was no mention of any gated community near my land in the county records. The road looked newly paved past the gate, like someone had poured HOA money into beautifying the middle of nowhere. But I wasn't here to make friends. I backtracked, found a service trail the surveyor had marked on the south edge of the property, and took it in reverse until I reached the faded boundary posts. I stepped out, boots crunching on dry gravel, and just stood there for a moment, breathing in the sharp, sagey air. No hum of AC units, no kids screaming, no HOA newsletters taped to my door, just a broken fence line and a horizon that didn't end. By sundown, I had the trailer set up and my generator humming. I used the pickup's floodlights to start clearing brush around the old barn and laid out a rough grid for future fencing. There was a dead jackrabbit under one of the porch beams. A good omen, in my book. 3 days into cleanup, the first warning came. It was mid-afternoon, sun high and mean, when I heard tires on gravel. I paused, rake in hand, and looked up as a white SUV rolled slowly toward the trailer. No plates. Tinted windows. It stopped 30 feet away. 2 men stepped out, both in khakis and navy polos embroidered with the Saguaro Trails Preserve logo. Big guys, military cuts, radios clipped to their belts, and one of them holding a tablet like it was an arrest warrant. "Sir," the taller one said, not bothering with introductions, "you are currently trespassing on protected property governed by the Saguaro Trails Homeowners Association." I blinked. Protected by what now? This entire zone is designated as a private ecological community. We maintain access control and land use enforcement over the preserve. I laughed once. That's a hell of a story. You're standing on parcel 68-4B. Bought it 3 weeks ago. County auction. Got the papers in the truck if you want to see. He ignored that. The shorter one was already circling my trailer, phone out, snapping photos like a wannabe code inspector. "You need to vacate the area immediately," tablet guy continued. "Unpermitted structures are not allowed. You're in violation of our community bylaws." I walked over to the truck, popped the glove box, and handed him a manila folder. Inside were copies of the deed, the parcel map, the zoning record, and a notarized letter from the county recorder confirming there were no active overlays or HOA boundaries. He skimmed the top page, frowned, then flipped through the rest. Slower now. The other guy muttered something into his radio, still watching me like I might pull a bazooka out of the barn. Eventually, tablet guy snapped the folder shut and handed it back. "You'll be hearing from us," he said flatly. "Make sure to use my legal address," I said, and smiled. "You know, the one on the deed." They left in silence, tires spinning dust behind them. As they drove off, the taller one turned to take one last photo of my truck. I waved. That night, I checked the security cam I'd mounted to the trailer roof, just in case. Their SUV had no plates front or back. I uploaded the footage to a cloud drive and saved it twice. The next morning, I found a can of red paint tossed into the gravel by my entry path. Someone had scrawled 3 letters on the side of a rotted fence post. Out. I picked up the can, dropped it in a contractor bag, and went back to work. They came back the next day. I wasn't surprised. Around 11 a.m., I heard the rumble of engines again. Not one this time. 3. All white SUVs, identical, creeping up the trail like it was a convoy. No plates. This time, they didn't bother staying outside the fence line. They pulled right into my clearing like they owned it. Same uniforms, but upgraded gear. Walkie-talkies buzzing, body cams strapped to their vests, and the same HOA security patches sewn onto their sleeves. One guy had a clipboard, another had what looked like a damn mobile scanner, and the tall one from yesterday, tablet guy, had returned, looking smug and sunburnt. "Hope you got your stuff packed," he said as he got out. "We're documenting continued violations." Another stepped forward and raised his phone, filming me without a word. "This is video evidence," he declared to no one in particular, "of an unauthorized individual occupying restricted preserve land and engaging in unpermitted construction." He waved the phone dramatically toward my trailer, the dirt piles, the firewood I'd stacked the night before. You'd think I was building a missile silo. "You boys done LARPing yet?" I asked, walking slowly toward my truck. "Or are you going to start measuring my boots next?" None of them laughed. The radio on one of their belts crackled. "Sheriff's en route," someone said over the line. "Well, good," I replied. "I love it when guests bring the law with them." Tablet guy stepped forward. "We recommend you comply." "This can go easy." "That's funny," I said, opening my truck door. That's what I was about to say. I reached into the passenger side slowly and openly, then unlatched the black nylon case behind the seat. Inside was a 12-gauge Remington 870, legally registered, safety on, unloaded. I didn't point it. I didn't even shoulder it. I simply walked it over to the front step of the trailer and set it in its hard plastic holster that I'd mounted by the doorway 2 days ago. Visible, lawful, undeniable. The effect was immediate. The guy filming stopped mid-sentence and lowered the phone. The short one took 2 steps back, hand twitching near his belt like he thought he might be packing heat, which would have been illegal, but hey, they'd already blown past legal about 4 SUVs ago. "Did you see that?" One of them shouted. "He's threatening us with a weapon." "No," I said calmly, arms folded. "I'm placing it on my property. Open carry's legal in this state. And unlike some folks, I'm not impersonating law enforcement or trespassing on land I don't own." They didn't respond. Instead, they backed off fast, nearly tripping over each other to get to the vehicles. The guy with the radio was calling something in, probably trying to escalate. Another one grabbed tablet guy by the arm, pulling him toward the driver's side. "I hope the sheriff brings handcuffs," the short one yelled as they piled in. "You're done, you psycho." They peeled out in a cloud of dust, but not before tablet guy, ever the content creator, managed to snap another photo of me, just standing there in front of my trailer, arms crossed, like it was a fucking photo shoot for Surplus Monthly. Once they were gone, I went into the trailer and calmly turned off the stove where beans were starting to bubble. Then I transferred the security footage from the trailer cam to a second flash drive and hid it in the spare tire well. I wasn't worried. I was furious. Not even an hour later, I got an alert from my off-site backup. They'd tried to access the footage. Someone was pinging the IP, probably thinking I was some idiot with a cheap dash cam. Joke was on them. I'd used encrypted cloud storage during deployment in worse places than this. By late afternoon, I found an envelope tucked under a rock by the mailbox, the one I hadn't even officially installed yet. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with 2 words typed in bold font, "Leave now." No signature, no letterhead, just hostility printed in Times New Roman. Cute. I burned the note in my fire pit that evening, then spent an hour installing 2 more cameras, one in a fake birdhouse and another under the gutter of the barn. Infrared, motion-triggered, synced to my phone. The generator could handle the extra load. Let them come again. I wasn't just some backwoods squatter. I was a property owner, and I'd fought bigger dogs than Karen's toy soldiers. A week passed. I kept working. My morning started with dust in my boots and ended with calluses and whiskey. I didn't hear a peep from the HOA goon squad. No more surprise visits. No more SUVS, just quiet. Which, frankly, made me more suspicious than relieved. Then the letter arrived. Certified envelope, signature required. Delivered not to my property but to my P.O. box in Tucson, the one only a few people had access to. The return address, Saguaro Trails Preserve Administrative Office. Inside was a glossy trifold letterhead, too polished for its own good, signed in crisp blue ink by Karen Melroy, President. It began with a cheerful "Dear Mr. McCain," and devolved quickly into threats dressed in legalese. According to Karen, I was currently occupying land under the jurisdiction of Saguaro Trails HOA. My non-permitted dwelling, RV/trailer, refuse piles, and unapproved construction activities were allegedly in violation of Preserve Restoration Mandates and Community Covenant 5.2b. I was instructed to cease and desist all occupation and remove all structures and refuse within 14 days, or face civil injunction and mandatory restitution for environmental damage. Attached to the letter was a community territory map, with my parcel highlighted in yellow, sitting comfortably inside a large green zone labeled Preserve Protected Boundary. Nice touch. Even better. A second document, a land designation transfer notice, supposedly filed by the Arizona Department of Land Resources 6 months ago, stating that my parcel had been voluntarily annexed into the Saguaro Trails Environmental Zone under Community Management Authority. Only problem, I had bought that land after the date listed on the transfer form, and my sale paperwork from the county never once mentioned any annexation, zoning overlay, or community encumbrance. Something smelled rotten. I scanned every document, uploaded them to my legal archive, and then called Doug, my property lawyer. Good guy. Wore cowboy boots with his suit and spoke like he charged by the breath. Doug reviewed the attachments, let out a low whistle, and said, "Well now, this is either bureaucratic schizophrenia or a real dumb criminal with access to a color printer." He promised to file a county-level inquiry and a temporary protective notice while we sorted it out. Meanwhile, I called the Pima County Recorder's Office and requested a certified copy of any annexation documents referencing my parcel. 3 days later, I got a call from a very tired clerk named Linda who said, "Sir, there's no such record. Not in our files, not in state files, not even in draft archives. Even better, she emailed me the real parcel map they had on file. And guess what? Not only was my land not inside any preserve zone, but the HOA itself had no recorded easements or expansion rights outside their initial development boundary filed 10 years ago. But here's where things got interesting. When I compared the physical county map to the online GIS version, I noticed something. The digital overlay showed a green border stretching around my property, labeled Saguaro Trails Eco Buffer. It hadn't been there before. I had screenshots from when I bought the land. And now, there it was, a neat little false fence line. I sent those files to Doug, who went silent for a long second and said, "They tried to change the damn map." And that's when I knew I wasn't dealing with a neurotic HOA president. I was dealing with a fraud artist. I drove into Tucson the next morning and paid a visit to the Office of Geographic Records. There, a semi-retired surveyor named Hank, who had worked with the office for 30 years, confirmed my suspicion. The GIS layer had been updated 4 weeks ago, based on community-supplied data from a certified land liaison. Guess who signed the data request? K. Melroy. It got worse. The electronic record had no physical counterpart. No minutes from any land meeting. No board approvals. No public notices. Just a PDF with a made-up signature and an aggressive sense of entitlement. Doug's voice on the phone that evening was colder than usual. "We've got a prima facie case for falsification of public record, property interference, and attempted fraud." He drafted a formal complaint to the Pima County Attorney's Office, citing 3 violations of ARS statutes, including tampering with government records and attempted unlawful annexation. I gave a sworn statement. Then I handed over all my documentation, camera footage of the security clowns, and copies of every letter they'd sent. I even gave them the GPS logs for my drone, which I'd used to chart the fence lines and boundary markers when I first got the land. That was the moment this stopped being personal. Karen had tried to fake the system. Now the system was going to eat her alive. They came at night. Not midnight. That would have been too honest. It was twilight. That soft, dusty hour where shadows stretch long and nerves start to twitch. The kind of hour cowards pick when they want to look brave but don't want to be seen. I was stacking reclaimed timber near the edge of the barn when I heard the sound, engines again. Not the slow, arrogant roll of SUVs like before. This was faster, coordinated, like a damn formation. 4 of them, white vehicles, high beams off. One rolled to block the south trail, another parked near the trailer. The other 2 stopped short and left their engines running. I stood still, didn't move, didn't reach for anything. 4 men stepped out, all geared up, vests, tactical gloves. One had what looked like a stun baton. Another wore a vest with HOAENFORCEMENT in block letters across the front. Not standard, not legal, and not subtle. They looked like they dressed for a raid on a meth lab. And leading the charge, tablet guy. Same smug face, same haircut. But this time, he wasn't carrying electronics. He was carrying a baton and walking like he'd finally convinced himself this was his Alamo. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. One of them barked, "You've had your warnings. You were told to leave. This is your last chance." Another took a step toward my trailer, grabbing the side railing. "Come out. You're being removed. Don't make us drag your ass out." I was calm, not out of courage, out of planning. See, after their last visit, I'd wired the property with a full perimeter of hidden infrared sensors, all synced to my phone and to a motion-triggered cloud camera network. I'd done it in Fallujah. I could do it in Pima County. So when their SUVs crossed my property line, my phone buzzed. When the first guy stepped across the invisible line near the barn, the cameras lit up. I tapped the screen in my pocket. One signal, the panic button. I didn't even have to call. I just waited. The guy with the baton moved first. He came up the steps, reached out, tried to grab the door handle. That's when I stepped out from behind the trailer corner, spotlight from the gable blinking on automatically. "Private property," I said. "Armed surveillance. You're being recorded. Leave now." He froze. The one at the steps flinched, then grabbed my arm. Big mistake. He didn't get far. My arm twisted up instinctively, broke his grip, and I shoved him backward into the gravel. He landed hard, cursing. That's when I heard the sirens, bright and close. 2 black and white cruisers came up the back trail, lights flashing, tires throwing dust. Pima County Sheriff's Department. My camera caught every one of those bastards spinning around like they'd just remembered they weren't real cops. The sheriff's deputy stepped out, hand on his holster, voice sharp. "Everyone stay right where you are. Step away from the resident." They didn't listen. Not right away. The guy with the vest kept barking about enforcement authority, but the deputy wasn't having it. He had them on the ground within minutes, disarmed and separated. One of them, the guy with the fake badge, was carrying a concealed Glock. No license. When they ran his ID, he had 0 certification for any kind of private security work. Even better, his badge didn't exist. It was custom printed, complete with a nonsense agency name and a QR code that linked to a dead HOA login portal. The deputy turned to me after backup arrived. "You said they tried to remove you." "Physically," I said. "After multiple trespassing events. Everything's on camera." We walked back toward the trailer, and I showed him the footage from my phone. Multiple angles, night vision, face shots, time-stamped overlays. The full symphony of premeditated idiocy. When they found the stun baton and zip ties in one of the vehicles, the tone changed. It went from incident to crime scene. An hour later, they had all 4 men in zip cuffs, seated along the gravel road, while detectives interviewed me and combed through the trailers. One of the investigators radioed in to say they'd found a long-range radio tuned to the HOA's private channel, and Karen Melroy's voice had been recorded giving live instructions, clear as day. "Push if he resists. Don't let him intimidate you. He doesn't belong there." That audio made it into the evidence log. One of the deputies whistled low and said, "This ain't some HOA gone overboard. This is coordinated trespass, impersonation, maybe even attempted assault." I nodded. "Told you. They think they own the land, but they don't even own themselves." The next morning, I woke up to silence again, but this time it felt different. This time, the war had gone public. I thought after the stunt with the fake rent-a-cops and the sheriff hauling them off, things would cool down. I was wrong. Things just got louder, and a hell of a lot more official. 2 days after the incident, I got a call from the Pima County Attorney's Office. They'd received the footage, my sworn statement, the forged land transfer docs, and now the full police report on the assault. The deputy DA on the line, a guy named Vincent Ramos, didn't mince words. "Mr. McCain," he said, We believe you are the victim of a coordinated campaign of property fraud, harassment, and criminal impersonation. We're opening a formal case. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or open a beer. I did both." Vincent explained that the sheriff's office had already transferred all materials to a task force handling real estate fraud, a growing issue in Arizona thanks to land grabs disguised as environmental initiatives. What set this case apart? The HOA had allegedly tried to fabricate jurisdiction over a parcel they never owned, enforce it through armed proxies, and then intimidate the legal owner off the land, all while modifying government GIS records without authorization. When I asked how that last part even happened, Vincent's tone shifted. "That's where it gets darker," he said. Someone inside the county system may have helped them. Turns out, the false preserve expansion map that Karen submitted wasn't just a colorful PDF, it had been uploaded through a credentialed account. A real one. An employee in the Geographic Records Office named Kyle Renner, now suspended, was under investigation for taking bribes in exchange for ecological overlays, favoring certain HOAs and private developers. Karen had submitted 3 maps through his login over the past year. Mine was the only one where the land was already sold, making it not just shady, but criminal. I drove into Tucson again to sit with Vincent and Doug in a brick office filled with boxes of archived land use filings and faded protest signs. Doug was pacing like a man who'd waited 10 years for a case this dirty to drop into his lap. "They're toast," he said, pointing at Karen's signature on the transfer notice. "This ain't amateur hour anymore. This is fraud with a paper trail. We started going through the data. It wasn't just my land." Karen had been gradually redrawing maps, tacking on extra parcels here and there, creating an illusion of unified, preserved territory. She never filed these changes with the state, just updated public-facing databases and bullied the neighbors into compliance. Doug reached out to a few other landowners on the fringe of the HOA's supposed zone. At least 2 of them had quietly sold their land last year after receiving similar compliance warnings. One of them, an elderly widow named Mrs. Evers, told Doug she had signed the deed over after HOA representatives showed up at her door with what looked like official county paperwork, complete with seals and all. Now it was a pattern. Forgery, harassment, and extortion under the color of conservation. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't staying quiet. I started receiving letters from a new HOA legal counsel, some firm with a mailbox address and a fax number that rang twice and died. Their letterhead claimed they'd be seeking an emergency injunction to preserve community integrity and warned me to cease defamatory claims regarding the organization and its president defamation. I was tempted to mail back the court transcripts and a copy of the sheriff's arrest log. Instead, I did something better. I posted a full update to my YouTube channel. Yeah, I'd quietly started one after the first altercation, mostly to document the absurdity of it all. But now I uploaded a full, calmly narrated video titled "They Tried to Steal My Land and Got Caught." It included body cam footage, blurred public documents, and a breakdown of how HOA corruption works under the radar. The video went viral in 24 hours. Local news picked it up, then regional. Then a podcast in Texas interviewed me about weaponized HOAs. Suddenly, I wasn't just a pissed-off property owner. I was a whistleblower. I got a call from a reporter in Phoenix who'd been covering fraudulent real estate seizures for years. When I mentioned Karen's name, there was a long pause. Then she said, "Wait, is that the same Melroy who testified during the Verde Creek rezoning case?" Apparently, Karen had a history. She had once led a campaign to block low-income housing under the guise of natural landscape preservation, except the land was already a gravel lot. She'd pushed hard to get it labeled as sensitive habitat. She almost pulled it off, too, until a leaked email showed she was planning to sell the land to a luxury developer once the city forced the zoning change. This wasn't some clueless suburban tyrant with a power complex. This was a serial manipulator with a blueprint, but this time, she'd picked the wrong battlefield. By the end of the week, the county attorney's office had issued a formal subpoena for HOA records. The judge approved an evidence preservation order and instructed HOA leadership to provide full financial disclosures, land communications, and internal correspondence. Karen went dark. No more letters. No more security patrols. Her silence wasn't victory. It was retreat. But that made her dangerous, because people like Karen don't go down easy. They wait, they calculate, they strike when the lights are off. So I doubled my perimeter surveillance, changed my phone number, and kept a shotgun loaded behind the door, because this was no longer about land. This was about exposing a system that let people like her play God. And I was all out of grace. It started with a drone. Not mine, someone else's, buzzing like a wasp above my trailer as I worked on restoring the barn roof. For a second, I thought maybe Karen had gotten bolder again. But then I saw the logo on the side. Channel 9 investigates. The media had arrived. Turns out, once the subpoena dropped, someone inside the HOA leaked a stack of internal emails to a local reporter. Not just bureaucratic crap. I'm talking financial records, digital maps with layers labeled target lots, and a goddamn memo from Karen herself, instructing the board to ensure visual cohesion of the preserve by pursuing available parcels via pressure and persuasion, pressure and persuasion. That's how she described fabricating deeds, falsifying GIS records, and sending goons with stun guns to drag me out. Within days, news vans were parked outside the Saguaro Trails Community Center, microphones shoved in board members' faces, neighbors whispering across driveways. One guy, a former HOA treasurer, broke completely and gave a full on-camera interview. She told us it was legal, that the land was technically unclaimed. I never saw the actual documents, just her versions. Doug called me that night. She's losing them, he said. They're jumping ship. And the auditor's coming in tomorrow. Pima County had assigned an external forensic accountant to go through the HOA's books. Every transfer, every expansion expense, every dollar spent on security enforcement. The board was served with a temporary administrative freeze. Karen, nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, I kept building. The barn roof was nearly finished. I'd reinforced the trailer with a real porch, set up solar panels. People started stopping by. Reporters, yes, but also strangers. One guy drove all the way from Flagstaff just to shake my hand. "You're doing what the rest of us always wanted to," he said. It was surreal. All I wanted was a quiet life on some dirt. Now I was getting mail from HOA victims in 7 different states. But the war wasn't over. Late one night, while reviewing footage from the barn's motion sensors, I caught a glimpse of a figure near the south fence line. Not armed, just standing. Watching. The camera auto-switched to thermal. Female. Medium build. Standing still for a full minute, then disappearing into the brush. I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. I just flagged it. Saved it. Then I got a call from Vincent. "You sitting down?" he asked. "Depends." "Do you consider a pile of lumber structurally load-bearing?" He didn't laugh. "We've identified over a dozen properties affected by the same fraud pattern, all tied back to Saguaro Trails. In 5 cases, the HOA collected compliance fines from owners who didn't technically live under their jurisdiction. 2 properties were forcibly fenced off. One was bulldozed under the excuse of land rehabilitation. I didn't know whether to scream or puke. Karen had created an entire shadow operation using the language of conservation to justify land grabs. She sold the board on eco-preservation, sold the neighbors on increased property value, sold herself on power. But here's the kicker. All of it relied on no one checking too closely. Vincent confirmed a warrant had been approved to search HOA records on site. Physical files, not just digital. Doug was ecstatic. "We're at the tipping point," he said. "This is where everything breaks open." And it did. The very next morning, the community center was swarmed, not SWAT style, more like a bureaucratic pincer move. Unmarked cars, men and women with lanyards, clipboards, not handcuffs. Yet, one of the HOA board members, an elderly woman named Ruth Delgado, physically tried to block the door, claimed it was private property. They read her the warrant. She burst into tears. Inside, they found everything. Dozens of fake zoning requests, drafts of annexation forms with blank signatures, a hard drive labeled Legacy Expansion Security Payment Logs showing monthly cash withdrawals. All roads led back to Karen. Then the big one, an email chain between her and a local contractor discussing the demolition of non-compliant structures, one of which was my barn. They'd written me off like I was a pest to be sprayed. Vincent called me again. "This goes federal," he said. "You good with that?" "I've got coffee and bandwidth," I replied. "Bring it on." That same week, the IRS and a federal land management investigator joined the party. Turns out Karen had applied for nonprofit conservation grants using the fake maps. She was pulling in state funds based on territories she didn't legally control. fraud, misuse of federal resources, conspiracy to defraud landowners. The charge list was growing like crabgrass, but as it all collapsed, something unexpected happened. A split inside the HOA. A group of homeowners formed an emergency coalition, essentially a coup against Karen's regime. They called themselves Preserve the Truth. I met with two of them, both veterans interestingly, who said they were horrified by what had happened and wanted to make things right. They even offered to help restore some of the old fences that Karen's crews had torn down on my property's edge. Said it was the least they could do. I agreed, not because I needed help building fences, but because it proved the system could heal after it cracked. Still, Karen herself was a ghost, until the subpoena for her personal devices landed. That was when the dominoes started falling fast. They finally arrested her on a Thursday. I was working in the North Field, digging post holes for a future fence line, when I got the call from Vincent. "It's official," he said. "She's in custody. Multiple counts. Bail denied. I didn't celebrate. Not because I wasn't glad, I was, but because it wasn't over yet. She still had the courtroom, and she still had teeth. The indictment was long. Forgery of public documents, filing false claims to state and federal agencies, attempted unlawful seizure of private property, conspiracy to commit fraud, coercion, trespassing, impersonation of law enforcement." And that was just the local list. The feds were still building theirs. They pulled her out of her house before dawn. Quiet, professional. No cameras, no theatrics. Just agents in plain clothes and a printed warrant that read like a novel. HOA members woke up to the news, and by noon, the entire neighborhood had shut its online forum down for maintenance. HOA Security Services, LLC quietly deactivated its website the same day, and then came the trial. I wasn't the only one called to testify, not even close. The witness list looked like a reunion of HOA war victims, elderly landowners, harassed veterans, confused board members, and one county clerk who looked ready to throttle Karen with her own binders. Doug prepared me like it was war. "Stay factual," he told me. "No anger, no jokes. Let the evidence speak. You're the only person in this courtroom who didn't lie." When I walked up to the stand, Karen looked at me. She didn't glare. She didn't smirk. She didn't flinch. She just watched, cold and blank. I gave my statement, the parcel number, the purchase, the threats, the forged map, the drone footage, the assault attempt, the digital overlays, the late-night trespasser, the fake letters, the illegal surveillance requests, all of it. When I mentioned the Preserve the Truth group formed by ex-HOA members, someone in the back of the room clapped once before the bailiff shut them up, but it was the audio that sealed it. The recording from the intercepted radio frequency, Karen's voice telling her fake security team to push if he resists, and don't let him intimidate you. Vincent played it in court, crystal clear, no edits. The jury flinched. Karen didn't move. Her lawyer, some cold fish from Phoenix in a gray suit and a 1,000-yard stare, tried every trick in the book, claimed she was misled by volunteers, that she never authorized physical force, that the maps were drafts, the documents administrative suggestions, but the timestamps didn't lie. The radio logs didn't lie. The forged signature trail didn't lie. And the victims didn't either. One woman cried on the stand describing how she'd sold her land to avoid HOA fines that were never real. A retired schoolteacher from Moraine testified that Karen used the same tactics to annex his irrigation rights, and he hadn't watered his trees in 2 years. It took 6 days. The jury came back and won, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't hold back. 12 years, no possibility of parole for the first 6. Immediate revocation of her eligibility to serve on any governing board or participate in real estate ventures. Mandatory restitution to victims. 2 of the security men pled out, 6 and 7 years respectively, for impersonation and unlawful restraint. The third man, tablet guy, flipped early and got probation in exchange for providing key testimony. His statements were damning. And the HOA? The county dissolved it by court order. Turns out their incorporation documents never legally permitted them to enforce rules outside their initial build zone. Everything they did beyond those original lots? Phantom authority. Karen had fabricated power out of nothing. A paper empire. Within weeks, properties inside the former Saguaro Trails Preserve were up for sale. Some families just packed and left, ashamed or angry. Others stayed, but the neighborhood changed. The manicured desert aesthetic gave way to DIY gardens, modest fences, and, eventually, a community bulletin board run by volunteers instead of tyrants. I received a formal letter of apology from the Pima County Recorder's Office, signed, sealed, notarized. They even offered compensation for the mapping error, which I declined. I didn't want money. I wanted the barn roof finished, the well dug, and the ground quiet again. After the sentencing, I stepped outside the courthouse into a parking lot full of cameras. I didn't speak, just walked past the reporters, got into my truck, and drove back to my land. When I got home, I hung a new sign on the trailgate. Not a threat, not a warning, just a truth. This land was never yours. 6 years passed. The land healed. Coyote Fence Ranch, as the county now officially recognized it, had become more than just a stubborn man's dream. It was a working property, solar-powered, self-reliant, with a goat pen, raised beds, a rotating field of sunflowers, and a barn that now served as a gallery and workshop. On weekends, the clearing out front transformed into a modest farmer's market. Honey, local crafts, fresh eggs, and coffee sold from a converted horse trailer. Funny thing, a lot of the people who came to sell were from Saguaro Trails, or what was left of it. Not all of them were bad. Most had been dragged into Karen's vision, too scared or too tired to fight. Some lost money, others lost neighbors. But when the HOA dissolved and the fake walls came down, a few of them came looking for something real. And I gave them that. Under one condition: no boards, no titles, no bylaws. Just mutual respect and clean boundaries. We had a deal. It worked. The old HOA community center had been turned into a tool co-op. The old security shed, now a lemonade stand on market days. A place once used to enforce fear was now a place where kids laughed in the dirt. The land knew peace again. Until the day she came back. It was early spring. Cool morning. I was brewing coffee on the front porch when I saw the figure walking up the road. Slow, careful steps. No vehicle in sight. She wore sunglasses, a denim jacket, and a hat low enough to hide most of her face. But I knew it was her. Karen Melroy. She stopped near the tree line, hands in her pockets, not moving forward, not looking for a confrontation. I didn't say anything, didn't reach for anything, just stood there, mug in hand, watching. She eventually crossed the open field and made her way up the gravel path toward the new signpost, a carved wooden arch my friends and I had made 2 summers prior. Above it, engraved in burnt lettering, "Welcome to Coyote Fence Ranch. This land is not for sale." And never was yours beneath it, a smaller metal plaque I'd bolted on after the trial. It held a quote I'd written down during one long night of thinking, one that I hoped people would carry with them. Freedom isn't what you're given, it's what you defend. She stood there for a long time, reading it, letting it sink in. Then she whispered something. I didn't catch it at first, but the wind carried it, soft and clear. You won. But at least, it was beautiful I didn't answer, not because I couldn't, but because there was nothing left to say. She turned and walked back the way she came. I watched until she disappeared into the dust. She was just another ghost now, a shadow that the sun had finally chased off the land. I finished my coffee and went back to work, tightening fence wire, checking irrigation, feeding the chickens. I didn't look back again. The land didn't belong to her anymore. And the future. It belonged to those who built it, not those who tried to steal it.